I was sitting at the Thanksgiving dinner table, staring at my sister's brand new $2,800 Prada handbag when she rolled her eyes and told me to stop acting so broke. The dining room went dead silent. What nobody at that table knew was that the receipts for her $38,000 credit card debt, which I had been secretly paying off to keep her out of prison, were sitting right inside my thrift store purse. To understand how I ended up sitting at that Thanksgiving table, vibrating with a rage so hot I thought my skin might melt off, you have to understand the dynamic of my family. In our house, there was the golden child, and then there was the utility player. My older sister, Brittany, was the golden child. She was a former pageant queen, a sorority president, and a woman whose Instagram feed looked like a mood board for a luxury lifestyle magazine. My parents, Susan and David, worshipped the ground she walked in her designer stilettos. I, Sophie, was the utility player, the reliable one, the one who got decent grades, went to a state school, fixed the Wi-Fi router, and never asked for anything. For years, I assumed Brittany's lavish lifestyle was funded by her job as a brand consultant in Chicago. She was always flying off to Miami, wearing fresh off-the-runway clothes, and driving a leased Mercedes. I was working as a junior graphic designer, picking up freelance gigs on the weekends, and driving a 2011 Honda Civic that made a terrifying rattling noise when it hit 60 miles per hour. But 2 years ago, the illusion of Brittany's success shattered, at least for me. My car had finally died, and I went to a dealership to finance a reliable used Toyota. I had worked hard, saved up a modest down payment, and knew my credit score was spotless because I barely spent a dime. I sat in the dealership chair, sipping terrible instant coffee, waiting for the finance manager to give me the green light. Instead, he came back with a grim expression. "I'm sorry, Sophie, but your credit score is in the low 500s. You have 3 maxed-out credit cards in collections, totaling over $38,000. We can't finance you." My stomach dropped into my shoes. I told him there had to be a mistake. I only had one credit card, with a $1,500 limit, and I paid it off every month. He spun his monitor around. There they were, 2 Platinum Chase cards and an Amex, all opened 4 years prior. I spent the next 3 days in a panic, calling banks and fraud departments. The fraud investigator asked me a routine question. "Do you recognize the physical address where the statements were being mailed?" He read off an address in Chicago. It was Brittany's luxury apartment building. The betrayal felt like a physical blow to the chest. When I was 18, just heading off to college, my mother had asked me to give Brittany my social security number. Mom had claimed Brittany needed a family member to vouch for a utility bill because her roommates had flaked. I was young, naive, and trusted my mother. Instead of a utility bill, Brittany had used my clean slate to open 3 high-limit credit cards, financing her boss babe lifestyle entirely on my identity. I drove straight to my parents' house. I had the printed credit reports in my hand, trembling with fury. I demanded they call Brittany right then and there. When Brittany finally answered via FaceTime from a resort in Cabo, I unleashed hell. I told her I was going to the police. I told her I was pressing charges for identity theft and wire fraud. That was when the real nightmare began. My mother, Susan, began to hyperventilate. She threw herself between me and the phone. "Sophie, you can't! If you file a police report, she'll go to jail. Her life will be ruined. She'll never get a job again." "My life is ruined!" I screamed back. "I can't even buy a used car. I'm legally responsible for $38,000 I didn't spend." My father just sat in his armchair, rubbing his temples, looking at me like I was the one causing a problem. "Let's not be dramatic, Sophie," he muttered. "We handle things as a family." Brittany, crying perfect, cinematic tears on the phone screen, swore she would pay it back. She claimed she had just hit a rough patch and that her consulting business was about to land a massive client. Here was the ultimatum my mother handed me. If I went to the police, my parents would cut me out of the family forever. They wouldn't speak to me, wouldn't invite me to holidays, and would write me out of the will. However, if I agreed to take out a personal consolidation loan to clear the collections and protect my name, Brittany would sign a legally binding contract to pay the $1,100 monthly installment. I was 24, terrified of losing my family, and manipulated by the people who were supposed to protect me. Like an idiot, I agreed. I consolidated the debt, I took the hit. Brittany signed a notarized agreement, promising to transfer me $1,100 on the first of every month. She paid for exactly 3 months. Then, the excuses started. My taxes were higher than expected. I had an emergency vet bill for the dog. I'll double up next month. I promise. Stop nagging me, Sophie. By month 6, she stopped answering my texts about the money altogether. When I brought it up to my parents, Mom would just sigh aggressively. Sophie, please. Your sister is under a lot of stress. You have a steady job. You can manage it for a bit. Stop being so obsessive about money. So, I managed it. I took a second job working night shifts at a 24-hour diner. I stopped going out. I bought my clothes at Goodwill. I ate rice and beans for days on end. I was exhausted, hollowed out, and living in a constant state of financial terror, all while sending $1,100 a month to a bank for trips I never took and clothes I never wore. Fast forward 2 years. I had managed to pay the $38,000 debt down to about $12,000, sacrificing my youth, my social life, and my mental health in the process. Thanksgiving Day arrived, cold and bitter. I was already dreading it. I had worked a double shift at the diner the night before to cover the holiday pay, getting exactly 4 hours of sleep before I had to wake up and make my contribution to the dinner. A massive tray of homemade cornbread stuffing. It was cheap to make, but it took hours of prep. I pulled up to my parents' house in my beat-up car, the same car I was stuck with because of my ruined credit. Sitting in the driveway was a brand new, glittering white Range Rover. Brittany had apparently upgraded. I carried my foil-wrapped tray to the front door, wearing a faded gray sweater and jeans that were a little too loose because I'd been skipping lunches to save cash. The moment I stepped inside, the disparity between us was suffocating. The house smelled of roasted turkey and expensive pine candles. My mother was fluttering around the kitchen in a silk blouse. Standing by the kitchen island, holding a glass of Veuve Clicquot, was Brittany. She looked flawless. She was wearing a cashmere sweater dress, knee-high suede boots, and heavy gold jewelry. Resting on the counter next to her, deliberately placed where everyone could see it, was a pristine, cream-colored Prada Galleria bag. I knew exactly how much it cost because I had seen it in a magazine at the diner. $2,800. Oh, Sophie, you're finally here, my mother said, barely looking up from the gravy. Put that, whatever that is, on the back counter. Brittany brought artisanal truffles from a boutique in the city. It's the stuffing you asked me to make, Mom, I said quietly, setting the heavy tray down. Brittany gave me a pitying look, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her champagne flute. You look tired, Chloe. Are you still working at that diner? You really should find something more aligned with your degree. I just hired a new junior assistant who makes 50 grand. You just have to know how to market yourself. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. I'm working 2 jobs because I have fixed expenses I can't ignore, Brittany. I stared pointedly at the Prada bag. Nice purse. Did that come out of the emergency fund you told me you were building? Mom immediately stepped between us, her voice dropping into a harsh whisper. Sophie, not today. Do not start drama on Thanksgiving. Your sister just got a huge promotion. We are celebrating. The afternoon dragged on in a torturous blur. Uncle Robert and Aunt Elaine arrived. We all sat down at the large mahogany dining table. The food was passed around, and as usual, the conversation revolved entirely around Brittany. The new Range Rover drives like an absolute dream, Brittany was boasting to Uncle Robert, cutting into a piece of turkey. I decided to just buy it outright instead of leasing. It's better for my tax bracket. Buy it outright. The words echoed in my head. She had just dropped at least $90,000 on an SUV while I was deciding whether I could afford to turn my heating on past 65 degrees this winter. And what about your ski trip? Aunt Elaine asked, practically beaming at her. Oh, Aspen is going to be amazing, Brittany gushed. We rented a massive chalet for New Year's. Mom, Dad, you guys are still coming, right? We wouldn't miss it, Dad boomed, raising his wine glass. I sat there, quietly pushing green beans around my plate. What about you, Sophie? Aunt Elaine asked, finally noticing I was at the table. Are you joining the family in Aspen? Before I could even open my mouth, Mom intervened, her tone dripping with passive-aggressive sympathy. Oh, Sophie can't make it, Elaine. She's focusing on saving money right now. She's on a very strict budget. It's a shame, Brittany sighed, taking a delicate sip of her wine. She looked at me from across the table, her eyes glinting with a mix of condescension and annoyance. Honestly, Sophie, it brings down the whole family energy. You really need to stop acting so broke all the time. It's a mindset, you know. Poverty is a mindset. If you just stopped being so cheap and invested in yourself, you wouldn't be stuck wearing 5-year-old sweaters to a holiday dinner. Silence fell over the table. The clinking of silverware stopped. Uncle Robert looked uncomfortable. My father took a long drink of wine. My mother just nodded, as if Brittany had just delivered a profound piece of philosophical wisdom. I looked at my mother. I looked at my father. I waited for one of them to say something, to defend me, to point out the sheer, unadulterated hypocrisy of the woman sitting across from me. They said nothing. The blood pounding in my ears sounded like a freight train. For 2 years, I had kept my mouth shut. I had swallowed my pride, destroyed my youth, and let my family treat me like a peasant, all to protect the golden child from the consequences of her own criminal actions. I had played the good sister. I had kept the secret. And for what? To be mocked for the poverty she forced me into. To be lectured on wealth by the parasite draining my bank account. I slowly wiped my mouth with a cloth napkin and set it down on the table. Acting broke? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Brittany rolled her eyes. Don't get defensive, Sophie. I'm just trying to help you. You carry this victim mentality everywhere you go. It's exhausting. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. The time for tears was over. Instead, I reached down to the floor, picked up my scuffed, thrift store faux leather tote bag, and unzipped it. I reached my hand into the worn fabric of my tote and pulled out a thick, heavy-duty red accordion folder. I slammed it down onto the dining table. It hit the mahogany wood with a heavy, satisfying thud that rattled the expensive crystal wine glasses. What is that, Sophie? My mother asked, her voice tight with sudden, nervous apprehension. She knew exactly what a folder that thick meant. She had seen it 2 years ago when I first confronted them. Just a little something to explain my mindset, I said, my voice steady, though my hands were trembling with pure adrenaline. I unhooked the elastic band and flipped the folder open. Sophie, stop it, my father warned, his tone taking on that low, authoritative pitch he always used to intimidate me into submission. Put that away. We have guests. This is Thanksgiving. No, David. Let her speak, Uncle Robert interjected. Robert was my father's older brother, a retired CPA with a no-nonsense attitude who had always been the moral compass of the extended family. He adjusted his glasses, looking from the red folder to me. What's going on, Sophie? I didn't look at my parents. I kept my eyes locked entirely on Brittany, who had suddenly stopped swirling her champagne. The smug, condescending smirk was slowly sliding off her perfectly contoured face. Brittany is right, I announced to the table, my voice carrying over the soft jazz playing through the ceiling speakers. I am broke, but I'm not broke because I don't work hard. And I'm certainly not broke because of my mindset. I'm broke because for the last 24 months, I have been paying off $38,000 of credit card debt that Brittany racked up in my name. Aunt Elaine gasped, a sharp intake of breath that echoed in the silent room. That is a lie! Brittany shrieked, her voice pitching up an octave. She looked frantically at our parents. Mom, make her stop! She's having one of her episodes. I have the receipts, Brittany. Literally. I pulled out the first stack of papers, the original credit reports, and the IP address logs I had fought tooth and nail to get from the fraud department. I slid them directly across the table to Uncle Robert. 4 years ago, when I left for college, Brittany used my social security number to open 2 Chase Platinum cards and an American Express. She maxed them out on luxury vacations, designer clothes, and spa treatments. She had the statements sent to her apartment in Chicago. Uncle Robert picked up the papers, his eyes darting across the highlighted sections. His face, usually ruddy and jovial, turned stone cold. Sophie, I am warning you. Put those papers away right now, my mother hissed, standing up from her chair. Her face was flushed with panic. Elaine, Robert, please ignore her. She's just jealous of her sister's success. You know how siblings can be. Jealous? I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that held no humor. I reached into the folder and pulled out the second document. It was 5 pages long, bound by a blue legal spine, with a glowing red notary stamp on the final page. I tossed it onto the center of the turkey platter, right over the garnish. This, I pointed at the grease-stained legal document, is a legally binding contract drafted 2 years ago. When I found out Brittany stole my identity and ruined my credit so badly I couldn't even finance a used car, I wanted to go to the police, but Mom and Dad begged me not to. They threatened to disown me if I pressed charges. Aunt Elaine turned to my mother, her eyes wide with horror. Susan, is this true? You threatened your own daughter to cover up a felony? My mother sputtered, clutching her napkin. We were trying to keep the family together. Brittany had made a simple mistake. We didn't want her future ruined over a silly misunderstanding. $38,000 is not a misunderstanding, Susan. It's grand larceny, Uncle Robert growled, slamming his fist on the table. The silverware clattered. He looked at my father with utter disgust. And you went along with this, David? You let your youngest daughter shoulder a mountain of fraudulent debt? My father shrank back into his chair, suddenly looking very small. Brittany promised to pay it back. It was supposed to be a family loan. Yes, she promised. I continued, seamlessly picking up the narrative. I was forced to take out a high-interest consolidation loan in my own name to clear the collections. Brittany signed that notarized contract, agreeing to pay me $1,100 a month. She paid for exactly 3 months. Then, she stopped. I turned to look at my sister. She was gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white. For the last year and a half, I have worked double shifts at a diner. I have skipped meals. I have sold my belongings. I have lived in constant, agonizing financial terror while I paid off your debt, Brittany. And today, I walk in here, exhausted to my bones, to find out you bought a $90,000 Range Rover in cash and a $3,000 Prada bag. And you have the audacity to sit there and tell me that my poverty is a mindset? You signed the loan! Brittany suddenly screamed, dropping the victim act entirely. Her face was contorted with vicious, cornered rage. It's in your name now, you stupid little brat. I don't owe you anything. You can't prove I made those charges, and that contract isn't worth the paper it's printed on. Actually, Brittany, I said, a slow, dark smile spreading across my face. That brings me to the best part of the evening. I pulled the final item out of my red folder. It was a thick manila envelope, sealed with official court tape. You see, when you stopped paying me, and Mom and Dad told me to just deal with it, I realized I was never going to see a dime of that money, I said, tapping the envelope against my palm. But I also realized that you were never going to stop lying. So, I took my tax return, the only money I had managed to scrape together, and I hired a private investigator. Brittany froze. The color instantly drained from her face, leaving her looking sickly and pale. A private investigator? My father choked out. Yes, a skip tracer, actually. Because you see, Brittany, you told Mom and Dad you got a huge promotion at your consulting firm. You told them you bought that Range Rover outright because of your incredible business acumen. But my investigator found out your consulting business went bankrupt 8 months ago. I looked around the table. The silence was so absolute I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. You didn't buy that car, I said, locking eyes with my sister. Your new fiancé bought that car. My mother gasped. Fiancé? Brittany, what is she talking about? His name is Richard, I told the room, ignoring my mother. He's a very successful, very wealthy commercial real estate developer in Chicago, 52 years old, divorced, no kids, and deeply, deeply protective of his assets. From what I gather, you two got secretly engaged last month, and you've been living in his penthouse, using his supplementary black card to fund this entire boss babe charade. Shut up! Brittany shrieked, lunging across the table. She knocked over a gravy boat, sending brown sauce spilling across the white linen tablecloth. Shut your mouth, Sophie! Uncle Robert stood up, intercepting her and shoving her back into her chair. Sit down and let her finish, he bellowed, his voice shaking the crystal chandelier. I calmly wiped a drop of spilled gravy off the manila envelope. I did a little digging into Richard. He seems like a smart guy. He requires prenuptial agreements. He values honesty. So, I figured, as his future sister-in-law, it was my moral obligation to welcome him to the family. Brittany's eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated terror. What did you do? She whispered. I sent him a copy of my red folder, I said, my voice sweet and light. I sent it overnight certified mail to his office. It included the IP logs of your identity theft, the notarized contract where you admitted to the debt, and a detailed ledger of the $38,000 you stole from your own little sister. I also included a lovely handwritten note explaining that you are currently dodging a $12,000 balance and that you have a history of opening credit cards in other people's names without their consent. You vindictive little, my mother started, advancing toward me. Oh, I'm not done, I interrupted, holding up the manila envelope and tossing it directly into Brittany's lap. That is a civil summons. I am officially suing you in county court for breach of contract for the remaining $12,000, plus legal fees and emotional distress. The process server couldn't get past Richard's doorman, so I figured I would just serve you myself at Thanksgiving dinner. Consider yourself served, sis. Right on cue. As if the universe was finally rewarding me for 2 years of absolute misery, Brittany's phone lit up on the table. The caller ID glowed brightly. Richard! Brittany stared at the phone like it was a live grenade. It buzzed against the wood, loud and demanding. You better answer that, I suggested, taking a slow sip of my water. He probably wants to ask you about the Prada bag you bought with his money yesterday while lecturing me about my poverty mindset. Brittany burst into hysterical, hyperventilating sobs. She grabbed her phone and ran out of the dining room, her heaving cries echoing down the hallway as she desperately tried to answer the call. My mother burst into tears, burying her face in her hands. You ruined everything, she sobbed at me. You ruined your sister's life. How could you be so cruel? Cruel? Uncle Robert snapped, stepping around the table to stand beside me. Susan, you and David should be ashamed of yourselves. You enabled a thief and tortured your innocent daughter to protect a liar. You two make me sick. He turned to his wife. Elaine, get your coat. We are leaving. I will not break bread with people who treat their own child like garbage. Aunt Elaine didn't say a word. She just gave my mother a look of absolute disgust, grabbed her purse, and walked out the front door. My father finally found his voice. He stood up, his face red with fury. Get out of my house, Sophie. If you walk out that door, you are no longer my daughter. I looked at the man who had let my sister destroy my 20s. I felt nothing but a cool, refreshing emptiness. That's the best Thanksgiving gift you could have ever given me, David, I said. I didn't bother taking the cornbread stuffing. I just picked up my scuffed thrift store tote bag, zipped it shut, and walked out the front door. The crisp, freezing November air hit my face, and for the first time in 2 years, I took a deep breath without feeling the crushing weight of panic in my chest. As I walked down the driveway toward my rattling, beat-up Honda Civic, I could hear Brittany screaming into her phone on the front porch, begging Richard not to cancel her credit cards. I got into my car, turned the key, and let the rattling engine roar to life. I turned up the radio, backed out of the driveway, and drove away from my family forever. That was the last time I ever spoke to my parents or my sister. Richard dumped her, the lawsuit forced her into bankruptcy, and I finally got my life back. If you loved this story of absolute karma, smash that like button right now. Share this video with a friend who loves satisfying family drama, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more crazy real-life revenge stories every single week. See you in the next one.